Well, welcome once again to Simple Groundwork and Diorama Techniques with me, your host, Bill Grigg. This is the meat and potatoes show today, gang. This is the show that people have been saying, Bill, please, show us how to airbrush, show us how to airbrush. Well, that is what I'm going to start with today. I'm going to show you basically how to airbrush a piece. Now, to start off with, now this is not everybody because I know some of you people have pulse compressors, but it would behoove you to get yourself a tank, a compressor with a tank. This, I believe, is like a 2-gallon tank. It goes up to like 110 pounds, and this fills up. Now, the reason I like spraying off of a tank is, unlike my old pulse, which is exactly that, you turn the piece, you turn the compressor on, it runs continuously, and it pulses out the air. Bup, 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 bup. That's what you hear. Bup, 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 bup. That's pulsing out the air. Off of a tank, it's a constant air stream. Now, I sprayed off of a pulse compressor for years and years and years. Very good results. No, not complaining about the results. But when I did switch to a tank, I did notice I had a lot more control over my airbrush. So it would be a good idea that if you're starting out and this is new to you, it would be a good thing to buy a compressor with a tank, a holding tank on it. Now let's get into the airbrush itself. Now I'm not going to go through airbrushes and show you the difference between a dual action and a single action and a blah blah blah. I'm not going to do all that stuff because I only own one. I am not a dual action person. I do not like to pull down, push back. I don't like that. I like to set it where I know I can. Now in my particular airbrush, not the volume of paint, but the volume of paint is controlled by this little cap right here, which you can see I can roll back and forth. Also, I have a reduction unit here on my trigger. Now what that does is, this particular airbrush blows at 40 pounds per square inch, 40 psi. If I don't have this up at 40 psi, I don't have enough push to draw my paint from my bottle up through and spray. So what this reduction piece does is, it cuts down the amount of air coming through, but it still gives me 40 pounds of crank at my source. So I'm still pushing 40 pounds, yet I'm able to take this and decrease my airflow. This is an old brush. This is like 35 years old. It still works like a charm. But the basic thing in airbrushing, guys, is to cut your paint. Learning how to cut your paint. And that's what I'll show you next. Now what I've got here is my base color, and I'm just going to use a brown and stay within the, come down right down onto these here too, Dave.
Okay, let's start that again. You started a little too quickly.
Okay.
Okay, give it...
What I'm going to do here, folks, is I'm going to stay within my browns. I'll spray a base coat. Then I'm going to show you how to enhance your colors throughout this. So come right down here, Dave. And these are my enhancement colors. Now, listen, we're in browns. The deal with when you're in browns is you stay within the family, always. You do not add black to darken. You do not add white to lighten. The only time you're going to add white to lighten is if you're doing like a Pacific-based aircraft where the sun really bleaches things out, or something in North Africa or something like that. Train guys, you might want to bleach something if you're doing like a Midwestern or a southerly scene where it gets really hot or things like that, but that's not the case. So the biggest thing here is cutting your paint, and I cannot give you a ratio other than to say maybe 2/3 of paint to 1/3 of thinner. But that's not a tried and true formula. And unfortunately, folks, I've been doing this such a long time, I know what I'm looking for. So again, taking a piece of sprue, going in and stirring my paint. And again, the exciting world of stirring paint. Hold on to your seats and put on a party hat. Because this is just riveting television. But this is essential. This is essential. If after you stir your paint, you want to put the cap back on and shake it, go ahead. But I do not recommend that, because that, again, puts paint up into the cap. The cap gets all messed up, gets around the ring of your bottle, and it could cause a decrease in longevity of your product. Now, just for purposes here, I'm not going to do a lot of paint because we don't want to go in and take a lot that we need to dump out. So, I'm going to take my stick and transfer over into my bottle just to get enough paint here to I can start to show you. And you can see it's kind of messy. Might be better if I put this in with a little bit of just pour it directly from the bottle. Clean your top. Clean your other bottle top. Now, in solvent-based paints, in other words, enamel paints, you can stay within a thinner made for that paint. I particularly don't do that. The reason being is I find this paint here to be a bit grainy. In other words, the pigment balls in this paint are very, very large as opposed to the pigment balls in this particular paint. What this company does is they grind their pigments down to nothing, nothing, nothing. These people do too, but these people go the extra step. They grind them down to nothing. Now, with this paint and this paint here, I both use a lacquer thinner. I cut it with a lacquer thinner. Now, the reason being is the lacquer attacks the pigment ball in this particular brand and beats that down like the small tins. So I get a smoother paint. That's why I cut with lacquer thinner. Also, lacquer thinner helps increase your drying time. It dries a little bit faster. Now, this is how I do it, guys. But like I say, I've been doing it such a long time, I know what I'm looking for. So I go up here, I get my paint, I tilt my bottle. I can see exactly how much sauce I have. And then I just kind of go in. And very carefully, you can see I'm taking my time. Just drop in a little lacquer. And there we go. Now, always cap up your lacquer when you're done. And it would be good if you were in a well-ventilated area. And I am in a pretty well-ventilated area. Now you notice, what am I doing? He's not stirring his paint. He's shaking his paint. And I kind of am, but if I was to go in and stir this, because I am using a lacquer-based paint, I do not want to take a piece of plastic and put it into the lacquer. The lacquer will attack the plastic, and it may, not necessarily, it may bleed into the paint, and you've put in plastic into your paint, and now you're going to be spraying, you know, long little stringy hairs, and that is not good. So if you get to a point where you are cutting your enamel-based paints with lacquer, stir it with like a popsicle stick or something wooden. You get in there, and there's no way that that's going to decrease. Now, another thing also, guys, we may just have to stop shooting because my compressor, once I start to spray, kicks back on at 70 pounds. So if that happens, we'll just stop talking and we'll start shooting again. So what do I do now? Take my brush. I know I've got my air source. Check my gauge. Do I have 40 pounds? No, I do not. So I've just increased my pressure gauge up to 40 pounds. Hear it? You can hear it. Screw this on. And honestly, here we go, gang. I mean, this is it. This isn't rocket science. It's the cut of the paint. And I don't know if you can get the cut in that bottle, Dave. Can you get a close-up in that bottle? I don't know if you're going to be able to get that cut. But it's, folks, what you remember when I did the washes and I was pulling the paint up the side of the cup and I was looking for that like wheat tea, wheat coffee look? That's what I've done in this. Same thing, but this is something you're going to have to experiment with and get your own little deal going. Now, you notice getting a little bit of paint here now. Now, if I want to increase, get a little bit heavier, I roll my tip, and there it comes out a little bit harder. Now, this is really very, very easy, and you can see how well it lays down. But what I'm basically doing this for is I want to spray a patch and get this patch really dark. So let me do that and I'll get back to you. Okay, now my compressor just turned off, so thankfully, hopefully we won't get the compressor running again in this. And you can see I added a little bit more paint to my jar. And once again, just to show you that I'm shooting paint. We'll get up here and we're shooting paint. Now what I have done here is I have gone and I've sprayed out a square of my base color. Now here's the deal, gang. We'll go on to this piece here. Make sure my hands are good and clean, and they really kind of aren't. But what we're going to do here is, this is what I'm going for. I'm going for the shading that we're doing here. Now why did I take this and spray out a solid square of paint? Why did I do this? Because I'm looking at this as, this is my base color and I want to enhance this base color. So how do I do that? Well, I've sprayed out my base and I know where I am. Now, taking a little bit lighter color, and we'll take this is Sand Gleb. It's a German color. And again, take it, go back into the exciting world of stirring paint. That's pretty good. And now what we're going to do is, we're going to come over here, unscrew the bottle. You can see how I'm getting rid of some of the excess paint there. Wipe it with my rag. Lay this down. I have an airbrush holder back here, so that's what I'm doing, guys. I'm putting the airbrush into a holder. And now I'm going to start taking, and I'm going to start lightening this base. And you can see it's only a couple of drops. Not much. I don't want to go too drastic here. Not at first. Put my cap on. Now, your airbrush... Oh, this is fighting me. Your airbrush, here's a good little trick. Push your cap down. Should probably do my little paint bottle maintenance. I've really gotten myself into that habit since I've done that show. Then, we're going to take this, because it's full of lacquer already, we haven't added that much different color. Now, because my airbrush is full of paint, no bottle, no nothing. But you can see, I can shoot color for a long time here. Once that's out, then we take this, we screw it back on. We make sure we're spraying. There it is. Now, how do I check my color? Well, what I like to do is, I like to take a piece of the sticky office paper and put it down just like that. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to spray along this edge. And we really should let this dry, and then I can see the contrast between what I've sprayed for my base and what I've done for lightening. Now I might take this, and if this is my actual piece, like let's say my panel, you got to be real careful. Always check your hands before you touch anything. The worst thing you can do is have a little drop of paint here and go pick up a piece, and now you got problems, guys. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to choose a panel. Like let's say you can see the difference between here and here on this panel. And that's what I'm going to do. I would take the sticky office paper, I would section this all off, and I would go in and do exactly what I've done right here. And do that one panel. Now, I may want to enhance this even a little bit more. So again, I take this off, I try to get out as much paint as I have held in my brush. And sometimes, boy, you can do this and it'll spray forever. That's pretty good. We might get the pressure kicking on here. But now we're going to take, and this is Skin Tone Warm Tint. You can see it's almost kind of a pinkish color. And again, wahoo. Oh, and guess what, gang? We're not going to be using Skin Warm Tone because we have Jello, the Mellow Jello. And there's a good example of not doing paint bottle maintenance. This goes into the afterthought pile. We'll use another color, Skin Tone Light. And again, stir, stir. And let's add quite a bit of lightness to this. Now you can see I only went in there for a second or so because, believe it or not, this skin tone too is starting to really give it up. A couple of drops in there. I'm going to throw this away too. Not even going to worry about paint bottle maintenance on that. Welcome to the real world of airbrushing. And again, I know I've got enough thinner in there to cut this way down. And go over here till I start to spray. Oh, you can see this has really, really worked. Wait until you see this line cut. Lay down my paper and shoot that line. Beautiful. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, Dave, you're going to get this as good. This will good. Let me get this so I can get it just so it'll dry. You can see the lack of thinner is really helping this to go, but of course. Now, here's what I really want you folks to see. Let me get a little pointy device here. You can see how I've gone into the base, ran a line with a little bit different color in it compared to my base. There it is. See it? Then again here, again, you can see. Can you really get, are you getting that, Dave? Is that's filming, definitely filming? And this is what you do. You just keep adding and adding and depleting. You may even want to go and throw in a little bit darker color back into this base. So in other words, I've taken this color base, which is burnt sienna. I went in with my Skin Tone Light. I went in with a sand gleb. But now, I may want to go in with a military brown and darken it down a little bit. It doesn't make any difference, guys. It makes no difference how many colors you add into this. As a matter of fact, the more colors you add, the better off you are, especially when you're keeping it subtle, 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 subtle. And you can see that really well in this Japanese franc. And Dave, if you would now, just get in tight and just kind of scan around all those panels so you get a good contrast between the two panels. And you tell me when you've got that.
Got it.
Okay. Now, Dave, go down to the tail of the aircraft and get in tight in those two surfaces in the top. Now, what I've done there on these two tail surfaces, I'm going to move a little bit. What I've done here in these two tail surfaces is I've gone in now with my oil paints and I've started to do the wash, and you can see how the wash comes up through and darkens all my engraved lines and my rivet holes and things like that. But what that wash has done is it's taken this patchworky look and kind of brought it into one hue, I guess is a good word to use. It still gives the differentiation between the tonal differences between my panels, but because I'm using that raw umber, it's tied the whole piece together because it's in one color, which creates one visual hue, which creates scale effect. So that's what you're doing here. This is how you're enhancing an aircraft or enhancing armor or whatever the case you're building. Of course, if you're in a brick building, to do this with an airbrush would be insane. I don't even that would be rubber room, and I would be whacking my head off the walls all day long. That would just make you crazy. That would be impractical. But anyhow, on aircraft armor, figures, it all works the same if you start to enhance. Now, once we are done, what do? Well, I get an old can, and unfortunately we've got a lot of paint in here, which you can get rid of. But truly, this is all I'm going to do. I've sprayed, everything's done. I know I don't need this color any longer. I'm absolutely positive of that. Make sure of that, guys. If you do screw up, you do not need to match your exact formula. In other words, I've taken my paint, I've thrown it away, and all of a sudden I realize, oh, you dummy, you forgot to paint the cowling, or you forgot to do something. It's no big deal. You don't need to be exactly the same mixture. You don't need it. You get your base color, you spray it on, you mess with it just like you did before. No one's going to notice if it's that tonal difference. Also on aircraft, as everybody knows, they may take a panel off another aircraft that's a totally different color. There could be a green panel on this aircraft. It makes no difference. So that's the deal. So what we're going to do, we take this. Now this is how I do it. I get as much paint out of my siphon tube as I can. Just dump it out. Set my brush down on a rag so it doesn't drip all over your workbench. And now I take just regular old everyday thinner. It is fighting me to open. Go into my bottle. The reason I'm doing this with thinner instead of lacquer thinner is this is very inexpensive, and I don't care how much of it I use. Kind of shake it around and dump it out. I also may take a paper towel and clean my top and actually shove it inside the bottle. See that? I'm stuffing that right inside the bottle. Get it so I can spin it. Pull that out and do it again. Now, why am I doing it again? Looks like that bottle's pretty clean. Well, I've got to clean the brush. Regular old thinner. You do not want to cut your solvent-based paints with a regular thinner. If you decide to do anything, stay with an enamel or stay within the manufacturer's product range. If you don't, you're going to have very bad consequences. Most outside thinners take regular paints like these and turn them to jello, and you saw it in that paint that I just threw away. Screw it on. Now we may get the compressor to kick on here, and we'll stop filming and coming back when you can hear me, because there's no way I can talk over the compressor. But you see I'm shaking it around. There's a little breather hole at the top. You want to keep that little breather hole nice and clean. And now I just go into my can and I start to spray. This is where the wife and kids really, you become very popular with the family, because you've got such a great aroma going into the air. Yep. Okay, now you can see that I'm almost down to my bottom of my jar here. Again, pulling it out. Now I'm going to get down to a point where it's not going to spray any longer. Dump this out. I like to set it upside down on a piece of paper towel. And then I go in, and again here. Now what I do is I come over to my piece of paper. I start to spray. I like white. I like to do it on white. That way I know if I'm clean or not. And you can see I've still got a little tint in there. So what I would do is, you probably should stay in a good full shot in this, Dave, so you just get this whole process going on. They don't need to see this close up or anything like that. But I would go in, really give this bottle a good clean. Make sure you get around your threads. And now to really blow this clean, I'm going to take some lacquer. Myself a little bit of lacquer in my bottle. Again, screw this top on. Screw the bottle on. Go into my can. Onto my piece of paper. Oh, that's blowing nice and clean now. And this is a good trick also, gang. Take your tip, put it into a rag, put it down tight. Now watch into the bottle. See it? It's called back flushing. And you can see I've got still a little bit of tint. Again, squirt this out. Dump it. And I would repeat this again. Put in a little bit of lacquer. Make sure your brush is good and clean before you put it away. And every once in a while, I would say, I don't know, I guess I do it every 6 months or so. I strip my airbrush down completely and I clean it completely. But as for right now, if I was doing a lot of jobs, there's no way I would clean my brush because the brush is constantly being lubricated. Again, into here, onto the paper. That's very clean. And now, get the lacquer out. And the last thing you're going to do is a little bit of regular thinner. Just a little bit. Come on, just a little bit. Back onto the brush. Back into the can. Now with regular thinner, after the lacquer thinner. Onto the paper just to see one more time. Yeah, nice and clean, nice and clean. Very clean. Why did I do this? Most people believe that you should re-grease the airbrush with the thinner when you're done. So gang, that's it. That is it. I hope you have enjoyed this series. I hope you've learned something from me. This was the meat and potatoes of it. Just follow these instructions. You can do the same thing with an acrylic. You cut it the exact same way, but I do cut my acrylics with a glass cleaner. Don't cut it with lacquer thinner because it's an acrylic, but you need an alcohol or a distilled water to cut your acrylics with. You do the exact same thing, and that's it, gang. That's it. So thank you for joining me. I've had a really good time doing this series. I truly hope you've learned something. Keep on building and see if you can get a better product. Thanks an awful lot. Bye-bye.